Hey everyone, welcome! So today we're diving into this explainer to unpack the intricate 1500-year timeline of Viktor from the Underworld universe. Honestly, he is arguably the smartest and undeniably the most ruthless vampire elder to ever rule the coven. We're going to examine his massive ego, his brilliant tactical mind, and look really closely at how he systematically engineered his own spectacular destruction. It's quite a ride.
Let's kick things off with a pretty provocative thought. Is a villain terrifying because of their monstrous, supernatural power? Or is it because of the calculated, cold-blooded lies they tell to maintain absolute control over everyone around them? Keep that question in the back of your mind as we trace Viktor's legacy today. Because, as you'll see, his real power wasn't just in his physical strength, it was in his total, complete manipulation of reality.
Just listen to that. I mean, this chilling quote establishes his absolute ruthlessness right out of the gate, doesn't it? We are looking at a leader who was willing to execute his own flesh and blood, his daughter Sonia, just to protect his political position and the perceived purity of his species. It's a jaw-dropping admission, for sure, but it perfectly frames the exact kind of tyrant we're dealing with here.
Okay, let's jump right into Section 1, the Warlord's Dark Bargain. So long before Viktor was even a vampire, the world was plagued by the very first iteration of werewolves, and these guys, they were completely feral. Less like tactical soldiers, and honestly more like a terrifying zombie outbreak, just infecting everything in sight. But later on, Viktor would discover lycans. Now, lycans were different. They could take human form, they could strategize, and most importantly to a guy like Viktor, they could be leashed. That distinction right there, that is the engine that drives his entire empire.
Let's break down exactly how this massive empire actually began. The very first vampire, Marcus, was desperate, right? His twin brother, William, was the source of that feral werewolf outbreak we just talked about, and Marcus needed military might to stop it. Well, he found a highly successful yet aging human warlord in Hungary named Viktor. So a deal was struck. Viktor offered his highly trained human army in exchange for eternal life. Viktor and his soldiers were turned into vampires by Marcus himself, giving them incredible strength and basically birthing the very first death dealers. Almost overnight, Viktor possessed unprecedented military leverage.
Moving right along to Section 2, imprisoning the first wolf. Now armed with this brand new military might, Viktor immediately, and I mean immediately, starts undermining the very guy who gave him immortality. After 600 years of hunting, they finally captured Marcus's uncontrollable brother William. Marcus obviously wanted to help his brother, but Viktor, acting as a supreme pragmatist, just surrounded Marcus with his army and demanded William be imprisoned forever. Honestly, Viktor probably just wanted to kill Marcus and William to seize total control. But Marcus dropped this brilliant, terrifying lie. If the first vampire dies, all in his line will follow. It was the ultimate insurance policy. Viktor couldn't risk his own extinction, so he was essentially forced to keep Marcus alive and keep William imprisoned.
So, to maintain ultimate power and ensure Marcus could never, ever free his brother, Viktor had this absolutely impenetrable metal sarcophagus built deep underground back in the late 1300s. And get this, look at how he handled the key. He split it into two impossibly guarded pieces. One half was embedded literally under the flesh of Viktor's own chest. The other half was disguised as a necklace and given to his daughter, Sonia, and she wore it completely unaware of its world-ending significance.
Which brings us to Section 3, the Lycan Rebellion.
When you track his life across a timeline, you see these massive gaps where Viktor somehow managed to suppress the truth. From his turning in the 6th century all the way to building the prison in the 1300s, he was an absolute, unquestioned ruler. But his hubris in 1402 during the Lycan Rebellion, that set a ticking clock on his demise, a clock that would finally ring in the early 2000s. Okay, so the absolutely crucial point here is how his own sheer arrogance caused this entire rebellion in the first place. See, he found a human-looking baby born to a werewolf, the first lycan, Lucian. Instead of killing him, Viktor kept him as a pet. Kind of sick, right? Impressed by Lucian's strength, Viktor then forced him to infect human slaves to breed a massive workforce of daylight guardians, keeping them in line with these brutal spiked collars that would literally kill them if they transformed. And the final straw? When his daughter Sonia fell in love with Lucian and became pregnant with a hybrid child, Viktor sentenced her to death. Thinking he was solving his problems, Viktor actually planted the very seeds of his own destruction.
You know, the real emotional catalyst for a centuries-long, incredibly bloody war, it wasn't about territory or food, it was this heartbreaking moment right here. Lucian was chained to the floor and forced to watch the woman he loved and their unborn child burn alive in the sunlight by the order of her own father. It was a trauma so profound, so devastating, that it gave Lucian the superhuman will to break his chains, rally his lycan brothers, and drive the vampires completely out of their own castle.
All right, on to Section 4, rewriting vampire history.
To protect that massive ego of his and, to maintain the absolute loyalty of the coven, Viktor manufactured this unbelievable web of lies. He actually rewrote official vampire texts to claim that he was the very first vampire, not Marcus. He erased Sonia entirely from their historical records. He completely covered up the fact that he was the reason a lycan war started in the first place. When Craven made a secret peace deal with a hiding Lucian, Viktor totally bought Craven's lie that Lucian was dead. He even exiled the official coven historian, Tanis, just to keep the real truth buried deep in the past.
Now this brings us to a super fascinating piece of the puzzle, Selene. Why did Viktor, this famously ruthless killer, spare a 19-year-old human girl? Well, because after Lucian escaped with Sonia's necklace, which remember was the key to William's prison, Viktor completely panicked. He slaughtered the family of the prison's architect to ensure no one could ever find it. But when he got to the architect's daughter, Selene, he just froze. She looked exactly like Sonia. Racked with suppressed guilt, he spared her, turned her into a vampire, and lied to her. He told her the lycans murdered her family, all so she would become his most loyal, vengeful warrior.
Let's dive into Section 5, a tyrant's downfall.
Exactly 100 years early. That is how prematurely Selene woke Viktor up from his required suspended animation hibernation. She broke the most sacred rules of the Coven because she uncovered a massive lycan conspiracy and realized the Coven's current leader, Craven, was a total traitor. But by waking Viktor up to warn him, she unintentionally pulled the thread that would unravel every single one of his ancient secrets.
Because what Selene discovered was that Lucian wasn't dead at all. He had survived and spent 600 years waiting in the shadows to create this exact biological anomaly, a hybrid. Now, normally, if a vampire and lycan mix blood, it's fatal at a cellular level. But Lucian found a human named Michael Corvin, a direct descendant of the original immortal bloodline. Michael's blood was basically the blank canvas that could perfectly merge the two viruses.
And man, here is the stunning dramatic irony of Viktor's whole story. During a massive battle, Michael is mortally wounded by silver bullets. To save his life, Selene, the surrogate daughter Viktor raised, bites Michael. And in doing so, she succeeds exactly where Sonia had failed centuries prior. She creates a hybrid. The very thing Viktor sacrificed his own flesh and blood to prevent is now literally staring him right in the face.
This just brilliantly illustrates the tragic loop of Viktor's life. Think about it. Sonia was his biological daughter, she loved a lycan, and she was brutally killed by Viktor. Centuries later, Selene, his surrogate daughter, falls in love with a hybrid. She makes the exact same choice to follow her heart over the Coven's strict rules. But this time, the outcome is vastly different. This time, the tyrant falls.
Think about this. Over 1,500 years, that's a millennium and a half of unmatched combat experience, incredible strength, and political manipulation. None of it could save Viktor in his final moments. Right in the middle of a brutal fight with the newly turned hybrid, Selene finally learns the horrifying truth. She learns that Viktor was the one who slaughtered her human family. Armed with that agonizing realization, she takes Viktor's own sword and literally slices his head in half. His own arrogance blinded him to the fact that his greatest threat wasn't the lycans. It was the very people he manipulated and kept closest to him.
So as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with the final question to chew on. Can the foundations of power ever truly survive when they are built entirely on the graves of our own toxic secrets? Viktor's 1,500-year reign seemed totally invincible, but it crumbled in an absolute instant under the sheer weight of his lies. It really makes you wonder just how many real-world empires, corporations, or leaders are out there unknowingly engineering their own spectacular destruction through the exact same kind of arrogant deception. Thank you so much for joining me for this deep dive, and hey, always keep questioning the history you're told.